Okay guys, what we're going to look at now is how to find the equation of a line. Now I took a picture off the internet, so we're going to find the equation of this line here. We might look for some more in a sec. Okay, so guys, in the last lesson we talked about the general form of an equation, and that's the point that we always need to start with. So always start with your general form. The general form was y equals ax plus b. You should be able to recite this in your sleep. And remember that b represents the y-intercept and a represents the gradient or the slope. And gradient was equal to the rise over the run. Okay, now we can use this with our lovely graph that we've got here in order to find its equation. Okay, so we know that we have y equals ax plus b. Okay, we're going to call this line k, okay, because usually there'll be a letter attached. Okay, so y equals ax plus b. Now we said that b is the y-intercept, and you can see on this graph, I hope, that the y-intercept in this case is 4. So we're going to write that down, b equals 4. Okay, that means we have y equals ax plus 4. Alright, so that's our first bit done. Then we just need to find a. So to find a is equal to rise over run. And we need to have a look at this. So what we need to do is we need to pick some points on our line and we need to look at what happens in between them. Okay, so you can see we have these points here. They've actually marked some for us. This point here on the y-axis, okay, and this point over here up in the middle of nowhere. Now we can actually look at what happens when we go from one point to the other and fill that in for the rise and the run. Whoops. So, for the rise, if we go from here to here, let's make it into a right-angled triangle. Okay, and you should be able to then see the rise from this point to this point is it went up by 2 squares. Okay, let's just check our axis, and each square was worth 1, so therefore our rise is going to be 2. Okay, then we need to look at our run. And you can see going from this point across to here, we have a run of 1, 2, 3 squares, and looking at our axis, those 3 squares are worth 3, so it's going to be 2 over 3. And that's it. We now have our b and our a, and we can just substitute those in. So we know that y is equal to 2/3 x plus 4. Okay, so that's quite straightforward. Now sometimes it's not going to be quite as straightforward, so I'd like to find one that's a little bit harder to see what happens when it's not clear where the points cross the y-axis. Okay, so I found another lovely graph for us, and that's this one here. Okay, it doesn't matter what's on it. Milliamps and volts, so this is something that you might see in chemics. Alright. So in this one, you can see that it's not actually clear where we're crossing the y-axis. Okay, so we don't know our b value. Alright, so again, we're always going to start, and let's call this line M for some reason. Sounds fun. Okay, we always start with that general form. So y equals ax plus b. Okay, always start with that. Now, in this graph, we need to find a point where it intersects with the grid lines in the background. Okay, and you can see there's only 2 spots. Okay, this one's actually really hard. Okay, we have a spot up here that I've marked in red, and that's where our line intersects the grid. And the only other spot where I can see it happening, oh nope, there's one here. So we've got another one here, and there's another one down here. So we need to look at using 2 of these points. Okay, so again we're going to say a is equal to rise over run, and we need to know what that rise over run is. So let's draw it on here, draw our triangle in. Okay, Now we need to find out what our rise is here. Now in this case it was a little bit different. I'm going to use a highlighter because it's going to be clear for us. So we're going up to here from here. Okay, so it's 3.5 minus 1.5. So our rise in this case is going to be 2. Okay, and let's have a look at what our run will be. Alright, I might use the highlighter again because that was quite nice. So our run is 1.5 to 4. Okay, so 4 minus 1.5 is 2.5. That's really hard. Okay, so that's going to be 2.5. Now, we don't want a fraction on the bottom. Okay, this one was actually quite a difficult question. We don't want a fraction on the bottom because it's not pretty. That's not a simplified fraction. Okay, so in order to make this one not into a fraction, we're actually going to double it. Okay, because then we will have, if we double the top and double the bottom, so times 2 on top we get 4, and times 2 on the bottom we will get 5. Okay, so that's a bit nicer. So now we have y is equal to 4/5 x plus b. And we don't know b. Okay, so we need to think about what we do know. What we do know in this case is that we have these points that we wrote in. So this one here, this point here is 1.5, 1.5. Okay, so that's 1. Or we have 4, 3.5, 3.5. Okay, so these are our two options. We have 1.5, 1.5, or 4, 3.5. Now, I always like to go with things that result in less decimals, so I think I'm going to go with the one on the right, 4, 3.5. All right, so we're going to say this is going through 4, 3.5. Okay, so we know in this case that 4 and 3.5 represent an x and a y value. So that means we can substitute these in. So where we have this x is 4, we're going to put that in place of the x. And we had y is 3.5, we're going to put that in place of the y. Okay, so we're going to substitute 3.5 for y. So 3.5 is equal to 4/5 times x, which was 4, plus b. All right. Now we're going to simplify this. I always find it easier to work with improper fractions. I don't like 3.5, so we're going to change that to 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7/2 is equal to 4 times 4 is 16/5 plus b. Now we've got some fractions, and that's a little bit strange for you guys. To make this easier, we can multiply everything by these denominators to get rid of them. Okay, so if we want to get rid of this 2, if we multiply everything by 2, it will go away. So let's try that. So multiply everything by 2, and we're going to get 7 is equal to 16 times 2 is 32/5 plus, oops, we didn't multiply by 2, 2b. Okay, now I want to get rid of the 5, so I'm going to multiply everything by 5. So 5 times 7, so we did 2 times here. Okay, now we're going to do 5 times everything. Okay, to get rid of everything there. So 5 times 7 is 35 is equal to, the 5s will cancel, so we get 32 plus 10b. Okay, now we want the 10b by itself, so let's minus 32 on both sides. Okay, so 5 minus 32 is 3 is equal to 10b. Then we're going to divide by 10. Okay, and then we know that we always write our variable on the left. B is equal to 3/10. Okay, that's actually quite nice. So our final equation is going to be y equals we had an m, it was line m, y equals 4/5 x, oops, 4/5 x plus 3/10. And that is the equation for this line on this graph. Okay, that was pretty tough. You're not likely to get much harder than that, but you do have to remember this was a graph going up, so our rise was positive. Remember, if the graph is going down as we go left to right, then that rise is going to be negative because it's called a drop. Okay, so please be careful with that. But this is how we get the equation of a line from a graph. Okay, we've just done a really fairly nice example and we've done a fairly hard one. So you should be able to handle anything if you could understand both of those.